All right, we are going to get jamming. So, just a little heads up, my headphones, my mic is really loud, so I would maybe recommend turning your volume down just a little bit if you're watching this. So, hello, Ashley, and anyone else who is watching this on YouTube. It is time to submit my final plan of action for teaching media literacy to junior high students. To provide a little bit of context, my name is Riley Hamilton. I am a junior high school teacher, recently transitioned from teaching in the high school, teaching grades 9 through 12. I'm now teaching 7th through ninth graders. I decided to shape the context of this curriculum design to adhere to teaching my homeroom students, which are eighth grade students this year. So that is kind of the lens that I'm going to be looking at this idea under. Had lots of ideas, had lots of fun coming up with this, and I'm excited to share with you what I came up with. So let's get started. Pertaining to the readings that we did in the class to which I'm submitting this to, that being a media literacy for teachers course, it was conveyed to us students that it is important to set a goal for what we are trying to accomplish, when we're going to accomplish, kind of following that traditional SMART format. So, creating a goal that is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And with that being said, I decided to come up with a goal that would fit into those guidelines. So I'll just read it out for you. By the end of the academic year, my eighth grade students in my homeroom class will be able to analyze and evaluate at least 3 different types of media messages, to identify the author's purpose and target audience, and to recognize misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, demonstrating their understanding through written reflections and multimedia projects. When I was kind of deciding how I was going to employ assessment, I focused on these 3 areas, that being evaluating media messages, recognizing misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation as a new term that I got to learn this term, which was awesome. And you will see towards the end of the presentation how these kind of align with what it is I'm trying to accomplish over the course of the school year. Because I think that I would have to ideally do this over the course of a whole year. It seems like a lot of information to work in. Plus, giving my background of teaching culinary arts, I had kind of a difficult time thinking of how I might teach this otherwise in my own class. But it seems like it would be appropriate, considering some new changes that may or may not be happening in my school district. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it now that we have the goal set out. If I were to go about implementing this plan of action, there are a series of steps that I would need to follow. And I've got it condensed down to 4, but I will definitely be diving into those steps a little bit more with each slide that we take a look at. The first step, first and foremost, that I would need to focus on is creating a scope and sequence. I've come up with a lot of ideas for what this might look like in practice, but the one that stood out to me was actually given to me by one of our ed tech department supervisors. They brought up the idea that maybe next year they would be implementing something along the lines of a Tech Tuesday. And I figured that this would actually be a really good place to put in lessons as such that have to do with promoting digital literacy. So this is hypothetical, but if we were to be doing that Tech Tuesday, it would be every other school week next year during homeroom. There'd be some mini lessons that we could use, and I would actually be following up from those mini lessons and implementing the curriculum that we will kind of talk about what this will look like. The way that I have it shaped right now, it would be 36 weeks. It would take the entire school year with little mini lessons each week and a assessment at weeks 8, 16, 24, and then a final project that would be taking place in week 30 or 32. So that's kind of the goal right now, but we will get into that. So first and foremost, get the scope and sequence dialed in. What does this look like week to week? What areas am I going to be assessing in? And again, I'm going to be focusing on those three areas as articulated in the goal. Once I have an idea of what this looks like and a realistic approach to how I could do this, it's time to start developing our rubrics. Our state that I live in adheres to the National Association for Media Literacy Education rubric, which has a few different standards for what it looks like to create, engage with, and understand media. So that would be the broad rubric that I would kind of be comparing the lessons that I am using to. But as far as the specific rubrics that I would be creating for success criteria based on the assessments and the assignments and the tasks and activities, those would also have to be developed with consideration to what OSPI wants us to be promoting and doing in our classrooms and what the lesson at hand actually is. So that would be a little bit of a time consuming process, but I think it would be well worth it and definitely something that I would need to focus on is to get those rubrics going, because how do I know what I'm teaching to if I don't have something to hold it to? And that was something that was shared with us in this course that I'm currently taking, Education 522, Media Literacy for Teachers. That is going to be one of our best friends, and it already is one of our best friends. So why not use it in the context of creating a rubric for teaching media literacy to students? Soon as I were to get these two things figured out, my scope and sequence, I would need to start the approval process for doing this in my classroom. And what that would look like is going to be depicted in a few slides. I actually kind of laid it out. I looked at the calendar for next school year and how this would actually look. But I believe that this would include collaborating with our EdTech department and getting approval from them before I kind of step on their feet. I would not want to do that. But also to get approval from administrators. Now that I think about it, I think there is a important piece that has to do with maybe reaching out to the families and letting them know, like, hey, this is what we're doing. This is the kind of stuff that we're going to be looking into, just because digital consumption can be a little bit of a sensitive topic for families. And I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea of what we're doing here, because this is a skill that is essential for everyone. Once approval is granted, hopefully that would be the time that we can actually start implementing the curriculum and doing what we are doing, which would be every other week. There would be a lesson following the mini lessons that are provided to us, and there would be a total of 4 projects that would be completed throughout the course. So these are kind of the steps that I would take to get the ball rolling. We'll talk a little bit more about what this would look like in the next slides. So as far as the responsibilities and deadlines for teachers and students, so for myself and my 8th grade goofballs, let's take a little bit of a look at what this would look like. So on my behalf, the implementation responsibilities, pardon me, I looked at our calendar and I realized that I would actually be attending the summer Washington Career and Technical Educators Conference the week of ending in August 7th here in 2026. So I figured that in a hypothetical situation, I would get to collaborate with some other teachers and kind of run through my scope and sequence and what it is that I'm trying to do that week of the conference, which gets over Wednesday the 5th. And then by Friday, I should have that all wrapped up and ready to roll for the presentation that I would like to give to an EdTech representative or supervisor and to one of our administrators the week of 8/16. That next day, that's a Sunday, the Monday, 8/17, would be our first startup day that we have, kind of getting ready to go back to school. I think that would maybe be a good time to kind of run it by our principal and talk to him about what I'm thinking about doing. So those are 2 key things that I would have to keep in mind as far as implementation. There's a lot of other like microcosms that go into that, but I think these are the 2 big responsibilities that would fall on my behalf, not to mention planning and everything else. When it comes time to teach, I would need to be presenting these materials on a bi-weekly basis. So it'd typically be probably week 2, 4, 6, an assessment 8, 16, 24, 32, that kind of picture, because it is every 2 weeks. So I would have to make sure that I'm diligent about putting together lessons that are meaningful, not just throwing something together, and setting my students up for success for what it is that I'm trying to get them to accomplish in these projects. And we'll kind of talk about what that looks like. As far as what my students are going to be participating in, I do need them to engage. I need them to be there and willing to learn and kind of be a part of the process, as we all do. Oh, shoot, my bad. But as far as the 4 projects go, here is kind of what I came up with for what that might look like. We'd have a media messages project. This would likely take course by having our students do a written report or essay of sorts, just to kind of like get the ball rolling in that sense, where they would be needing to respond to some prompts about how they have to, or how they manage the task of interpreting media messages. And we would use a variety of platforms. We would do electronic media, visual media, print media, and other sources. So those would probably be the 3 that I would focus on. Then in week 12, I thought this would be a cool idea, to do a potential bias podcast, where, kind of going off that same interpreting media flow, we have students pair up and do a podcast about, what is a time that they maybe falsely read media and interpret it one way when it was actually meant to go another, but more or less to just share their experiences of their sensing bias in media, or maybe a time that they feel like they got bamboozled about what they saw in the media. Our last project before we would do my final one that I'm excited for, I saw Tumwater High School did one of these on the OSP website. I thought that was really cool. And that would be a digital citizenship slide. So they would be assigned to a prompt or to a portion of digital citizenship, to where they would just make one slide. And that is kind of going to be the slide that they're going to be the master of in our hopeful digital literacy night, which would be taking place towards the end of the school year, where we can kind of share what we found, invite friends, families, etc., and put on a little showcase. I thought that would be really cool. Definitely ambitious, considering kind of the junior high students, and all the goofiness that goes along with that. But coming telling you firsthand, teaching culinary this year, I had them make garlic naan from scratch, and they did a great job. So I have a feeling that they could knock this out of the park. I think they could do a really great job. So this is what our kiddos would be responsible for. Of course, I would have to help them every step of the way, but these are the key features of their responsibilities: is focusing on these tasks and making meaningful change in their lives as media consumers. Excuse me, I got the hiccups. So, some of the resources that I would be leaning into are the resources that I have learned about in this course. And that would be the one that stood out to me the most up there at the top. I got a little distracted. Is the Common Sense Education, Digital Literacy, and Wellbeing curriculum. We were oriented to this in our class very early on when we were going over some of the media literacy resources available for teachers. And this has, from 7th to 8th grade, there were 36 lessons that could be delivered, which gives us 18 lessons that I could lean into for those bi-weekly instructional periods following Tech Tuesday. And I don't think that I would use them every single week, because I kind of like some of the content that is provided in the Crash Course Media Literacy series. I think it would be kind of good to supplement with some of that as well, to kind of help us as we think about those projects that I came up with. I found another resource in our course as well that I feel like would kind of help me, because right now it is just kind of a crazy broad idea, to kind of put it into practice, see what it would look like compared to, our school's mission statement, our district, what our district is trying to accomplish at that level. The Media Spot provides a scope and sequence template, for teachers that can be used, and kind of put everything on paper to what we are thinking. So these three sources I would certainly lean into as I go about forming this. Um, and that kind of leads us towards the end of our action plan and our time. The main source that I used was the one that was provided on behalf of our instructor, Ashley. And that this source in particular was used in reference to how to create an action plan for what this would look like if I were to do this. So, thank you for bearing with me through that. I don't know whereabouts you teach in the world. I assume you're a teacher if you're watching this, or an aspiring teacher. But all I know is I got 6 more wake ups until it's winter break, and it definitely feels like I have 6 more wake ups. So thank you so much for being here with me. Hope you have a great night. Ashley, thank you for another great course, and it's everything you do for us, making it meaningful. So have a fantastic evening.